Well, looks like Warped Tour is back. So this news came out of nowhere, but if it's true, not only is Warped Tour back, we're getting Warped Tour in 2025. So the initial report came from Rockfeed. I'll have the tweet up somewhere over here, and I'll read it as well. One of rock's most iconic brands will be making a comeback in 2025, Rockfeed has learned. According to multiple sources familiar with the matter, Warped Tour will return with a series of festivals next year. Then we go on to talk about popular bands on the Warped Tour, Blink, Some, Paramore, Katy Perry. Then they also say when Warped Tour returns in 2025, the rock festival will be overseen by Live Nation, but the festival founder, Kevin Lyman, is reportedly set to be heavily involved, and no comment from Live Nation, although Rockfeed did reach out. So just by reading it and looking at the context clues, Rockfeed, they're not going to put something out something this big about Warped Tour, a brand, everybody in the scene knows what Warped Tour is. They're not going to put out this tweet if they weren't, at least I would hope they wouldn't put this out if they weren't 100% that this is actually happening. Now, this isn't the only news we have about Warped Tour and its potential comeback. If you remember my last video, that it's been a while since I did a video on Warped Tour, but I talked about in that video that I think it was one or maybe multiple members of the band Attila wanted to purchase the brand, the IP, everything that is Warped Tour from the founder, Kevin, but Kevin said, no, I think I have some plans with Warped Tour going forward. And I think these are the plans. And the last piece of information, really the last piece of the puzzle here, is if you remember all the way back in 2018, that statement from Kevin and Warped Tour that laid out that Warped Tour was ending, one of the last sentences in that statement was that 2018 would be the final full cross-country run of the Warped Tour. So they always left the door open for a comeback. If you've been following the business side of the scene over the last few years, you already know that nostalgia for the early 2000s emo, pop-punk, punk rock scene is extremely high. You can look at the success of things like the When We Were Young Fest, emo nights, all these legacy bands coming back, or just the success of the tours that they're doing, and not to mention elder emo, an entire new word was created to kind of sum up this new nostalgia for the early 2000s. And if you think about it, really the only thing that hasn't come back from that time is the Warped Tour. Now, what does the Warped Tour look like in 2025? I have no inside information, but I think I can make a few educated guesses. If Live Nation actually does have some kind of ownership in Warped Tour, I think it's pretty safe to say that ticket prices will not be anything like you remember if you went to Warped Tour back in the day, and I think it's also safe to say that Warped Tour can say a nice hi and hello to dynamic pricing. Now, if Warped Tour does do a few dates across the country, we've seen something like this happen before, most notably with Riot Fest, where a few years ago they were in Chicago, Denver, Dallas, and Toronto, I believe. So it wouldn't be the first time that a more punk, emo, pop-punk leaning festival tried this. Riot Fest eventually did just kind of return to just the Chicago date, so I don't know if that has anything to do with how profitable or the success of Riot Fest had when doing those multiple stops. One of the big reasons people like the Warped Tour is because the tour went to a lot of these smaller cities in the country. Some of these cities that never got anything close to the amount of bands that were on Warped Tour in that small city. So if you were a kid, I feel like the last time that I went to a Warped Tour, and it wasn't like 17 or 18, it would have been, probably 2012, 2013, maybe something like that. I feel like I paid around $50 here in Chicago. I don't think it was anything really more than that, at least nothing that I can remember. So if you were in one of these smaller cities, it was a great chance to pay not a lot of money and see a ton of bands. Warped Tour and the way that it was laid out in the summer was also a great promotional tour for a lot of the bands. You could announce your album or release the album before the tour, and then during the entire tour you could sell, back then it was CDs, but now I guess it would be vinyl, merch, all that stuff, and then you could see a band rise in popularity literally as the Warped Tour was happening. I wonder if Warped Tour will continue to just be in the summer, or if they move it around, and as long as your city happens to be warm weather during that time, they'll just go there and they'll just kind of throw out the entire Warped Tours only happening in the summer thing. And it will be interesting to see if the Warped Tour disrupts the current touring economy with smaller bands in the summer, because again, it's been a long time since we've had the Warped Tour, and a lot of the reason Warped Tour was in the summer is because it was for mostly young kids and nobody was in school. If you have a Warped Tour that happens in October or something like that, obviously whether you're high school, college, you're in school. So that's a big reason Warped Tour was in the summer. And does it disrupt, if you're a young band, do you and two other bands go and tour the entire summer and play small clubs and venues across the country? Or if you get asked to play Warped Tour, do you take that deal and will that help you with exposure? So what bands do we want to see at Warped Tour 2025? I think the biggest one, without even question, is Blink-182. They are the biggest pop punk band in the world. And if we're talking about nostalgia, there's really nothing more nostalgic than Blink-182 on the Warped Tour. A band like Linkin Park wouldn't shock me at all. Linkin Park's announcement of their new singer, Emily Armstrong, I thought went great, at least that first day. Then, obviously, we got all the backlash, and I know that she has responded to some of it at least, but at least of this recording yesterday, Linkin Park sold out the LA Arena, and it was a sellout of 17,000 people. So if we're just looking at it from the business side, I don't think Linkin Park is slowing down at all. And I know a lot of people won't like it, but Machine Gun Kelly being on this new version of the Warped Tour, again, wouldn't shock me at all. I know a lot of you don't like Machine Gun Kelly, but his albums, Tickets to My Downfall, and what's the other one, Mainstream Sellout, they did introduce a lot of people to pop punk. And as I've said before many times on the channel, if you look at the comments of any of those music videos or videos of the songs or anything like that from those two albums, there are thousands of comments of people saying that sound reminds them, Machine Gun Kelly reminds them of the nostalgic sound of emo and pop punk in the 2000s. And taking it even further, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we saw some of the TikTokers that are synonymous with emo on TikTok that also have a music career. It wouldn't shock me to see any of them on the new version of the Warped Tour. I thought of what bands Warped Tour could get to reunite that would be pretty interesting. So you have the big two that we always talk about, Title Fight, Modern Baseball. Operation Ivy has been rumored to play Riot Fest for years, but it's never happened, at least not yet. You have Black Flag with Henry Rollins. That's something we haven't seen. What else? I mean, like, if you can go down the emo route of The Promise Ring, Sunny Day Real Estate obviously is back, but seeing them on Warped Tour, I guess, would be fun. We know that the When We Were Young Fest is doing their album plays, and pretty much every band in the pop punk and emo scene is doing their most popular album this year, so I don't think there's anything that new that would be for a Warped Tour in 2025, unless you get like a band to play like a deep cut or like a full album that isn't like the band's biggest popular album. The only band on When We Were Young that I don't believe is playing a full album is Fall Out Boy, and I think some of the reports were that Fall Out Boy is just totally against playing a full album. But again, if we're talking about Warped Tour, we're talking about elder emos, we're talking about nostalgia. You announce Warped Tour is coming back in 2025, and Fall Out Boy is playing Take This to Your Grave in full, I'm there. If the Live Nation relationship is real, I don't see an official announcement coming until after When We Were Young, just so When We Were Young has its, promotional and marketing period solo on the calendar. And I think Live Nation and Warped Tour itself are going to be looking at all the reactions, all the articles, all the videos that are going to come out today or in the next few days about Warped Tour coming back. They're going to take notes, see what they can change or see what they can do for their announcement that really, stands them out in the crazy news cycle that we have. But I would say after When We Were Young is probably when we can get some kind of announcement, because if you think about it, 2025 really in the grand scheme of things is not that far away. So at some point relatively soon, we're probably going to get an announcement. What do you think about the potential of Warped Tour coming back in 2025? What things do you want them to change? What bands do you want to see? What do you want the ticket prices to be? Let me know down in the comments below. Please like the video. It really helps me out, really helps the channel out. Subscribe if you haven't, and thanks for watching.